This video is formatted as a podcast you can listen to. Having said that, you'll probably be able to follow the information in this video a lot more easy if you're able to at least occasionally check the screen to see the transcriptions of the messages I'm talking about. But you certainly won't need to stare at the screen for the entire video. Okay, if you're watching this video around the time it's being uploaded, there's a good chance that you're brand new to the Neat Intel channel and you hadn't heard about the Neat Intel project up until fairly recently. I'm saying that because after a set of Skymaster events that were broadcast on the US military's high-frequency global communication system in April of 2024, the amount of subscribers that this channel has tripled. It's certainly exciting to see this level of interest in US military communications, and while Skymaster events correlate to pre-scheduled military exercises that happen only a few times a year, so you'll only have these very large set of Skymaster events every now and again, EAMs and other activity broadcast on the HFGCS happens all 365 days of the year. Now, for those of you that are new to all of this, a lot of information about EAMs that answer some of the questions I've been getting about the HFGCS are indeed answered as part of the Neat Intel project, and information that addresses your questions is available in the YouTube video archive on this channel, as well as the Neat Intel Twitter account, some additional resources, many of which I mention in my videos, and or link to in the descriptions of videos. On top of that, what I'm going to be doing today and over the next few days is uploading a set of quote-unquote analysis videos that I made in September, October, and November of 2023. While the videos are going to be talking about messages broadcast in the past, and that may cause some people to think that they're not as relevant anymore, you will find that HFGCS traffic is pretty similar across extended periods of time. So the ideas that I'm going to discuss in these videos answer a lot of questions that you have, not just in April of 2024, but may answer the questions you have in May, June, July, etc. throughout 2024, likely into 2025 and beyond. This video in specific covers September 12th to 22nd of 2023 inclusive. This actually happens to be an interesting period to cover because it happens to include the date on which a pilot lost control of an F-35 and it crashed in South Carolina. You may remember that event. And on days like that, I often would get questions about whether EAM traffic correlates with that event, or on other days where things happen that people are aware of, they'll wonder whether EAM traffic correlates to that. So in this video, you'll get my thoughts on exactly that, how I responded to people who were asking me that question at the time. Some of the other ideas that are discussed in this video, I briefly touch on what it means when words seem to appear in an EAM. Now, before we get going, I do want to again state, yes, this video was uploaded in September of 2023. Because I continue to monitor the HFGCS transcribed EAMs, there are new discoveries and observations that I make later on, and some of the observations I make in this video may be a little bit out of date. You might notice that if you have been following this channel a lot longer. Now, if you're brand new to all of this, no worries, because listening to these is still going to help you form a great basis to get an idea of what's typical for the HFGCS and EAMs. Rather, more importantly, there are a few things that are out of date, and I do need to mention them at the top. So my Twitter account at the time these videos were uploaded was 02_0279. I still have control of that account, but it's now a placeholder, and all relevant information moved to the twitter.com/neatintel account. The second thing, I often mention in this video a site called EAM.watch. That is a crowdsourced database of EAMs that anyone can contribute message transcriptions and recordings to. I myself stopped contributing to that website in November of 2023. And I find that it is no longer a place to go to for up-to-date, comprehensive information on the HFGCS. Another concern I have is that its Discord community is a little wonky, to put it mildly. Having said that, the historical data that you find when you pull up that website is still going to be valuable for the sheer volume of messages. And again, the Discord community has its issues, and they're not small, but people who are contributing to the site in and of itself as its own thing are still, as I've seen, contributing mostly accurate transcriptions. And certainly when they upload recordings alongside their transcriptions, that's an opportunity for you to verify that for yourself. The third and last thing that I want to mention at the top before we let the video speak for itself, a few times I mentioned an individual called Kira Lester. This was someone whose interest in covering the HFGCS was brief, and their contributions oscillated between very good and very unreasonable. At one point, they disappeared, deleted their accounts, and left in a very strange set of circumstances. when I mention them in this video and some of the future videos that I'm going to be re-uploading to this channel, I generally made sure to double check their contributions before including it under this project, so you shouldn't have any concerns along that end. I believe that is going to be all the information you need to watch this video, and I'll also have some closing comments at the end. That said, let's go. Today's video, basically after September 10th or so, I had something come up and I wasn't able to put as much time into monitoring the HFGCS as I normally do. Thankfully, what happened this time is, as far as the EAM.watch database goes, an individual goes by the username Kira Lester filled in there. And because of the EAM.watch automated bot, I was also able to kind of go through and not double check every single one of those messages, but just do a few spot checks here and there. So the majority of the message transcriptions that we're going to see and talk about today, I cannot take credit for. They came from Kira Lester. And on the other channel where most of my HFGCS stuff has moved over to, Neat Intel, there was kind of a quick summary for September 11th or 12th through to the 22nd inclusive. And I thought what I would do, and I think I mentioned it on my Patreon and maybe to a few people, is I would kind of just take this as an opportunity to go through and do a little bit of commentary, just point out maybe some of the interesting things that happened over the last few days. I have a lot going on, both in terms of what is going on with the HFGCS right now. Right now I'm recording this on September 25th, and the last 3 days, September 23rd, 24th, and today, there have been a lot of weird digital signals on the HFGCS. I honestly don't know what's going on. I think Russia may be broadcasting on the frequency. If you guys know anything about this subject matter, I would definitely encourage you to check out my Twitter, link in the description. But as originally promised, we're just going to go through the next few days, backlog, and I'll just point out some of the more interesting stuff that happened on these days. And this is not going to be a hyper-edited video. I'm literally just going to use the first recording that I make, run it through a couple filters so that my voice sounds nice, but if there's too much umming or ahhing, kind of is what it is. So just, I did do September 11th coverage, but because it's going to be relevant to September 12th, you can just see the call sign for the day was Methodist. And I wanted to point to that briefly. I also want to point out the 2034 message as well as the 2039. You see that set there highlighted in yellow, the SSJJKK. That's also going to come up in a bit. So if we go to September 12th, this is a good example. People ask me about this sometimes. Do they ever make mistakes on the HFGCS? The answer is yes, they definitely do. Sometimes it's obvious when they issue a correction to a misread item or something over the air. But in this case, there actually was an operator who kept using the wrong call sign. So you can see the call sign should have been sorority, but for some reason, some operator kept using the call sign Methodist. I can't tell you with 100% confidence that they're using the wrong call sign, but it certainly looks like it. To me anyways, it's unusual, highly, highly unusual for them to carry a call sign out to the next day. And if you go back and listen to recordings on EAM.watch, you'll notice that sorority is not like an airborne station, it's a ground station. So most likely the call sign for September 12th was supposed to be sorority. Skipping ahead to September 13th, not too much to say here. A lot of messages for a call sign Artisan Well and Till. That's actually something I'm wondering about. How many characters? I'm doing this kind of out loud right now. This has just occurred to me. How many characters are in Artesian Well? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. A little bit long. I have a working theory on character limits. One is really obvious. I've talked about it before, but for the daily call signs, they are never longer than 9 characters, including spaces. And you can see that's actually how I've set up the time cards. But some of the addressee call signs are definitely a lot longer. I'm trying to figure out if they have a limit. I'm not sure of those yet. Anyways, moving on. Really not too much to say about September 13th other than that. September 14th, you will see quite a lot going on there. High degree of messages, and we'll just look at the notes briefly there. It's sad there was a 55 character message, wonderful. You'll notice the 550 message rank file, there is XXAAFF, and I believe it was on this day that I tweeted about this, that I kind of noticed this. I'm not sure what you would call these. Not a triplet, maybe a trigram. I'm looking this up right now. I think someone used that word around me recently. Trigram, a group of 3 consecutive written units, such as letters, syllables, or a word. That may be the right word. Not super sure, but you can kind of see I did a search of my database for all the messages I've transcribed and got on a spreadsheet on my computer. And you can see up until September 14th, they don't come up very often. July 23rd, 2023, September 11th, 2023, the one we looked at earlier, and the one on September 14th. And I think it is a little bit unusual that they're clustered together like this, relatively closely together, and just kind of bear this in mind because we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a bit, actually. This is not the last time we're going to see a trigram in the same period of time. September 15th, this is going to be a little bit silly to some, but if we take a look at the 504 message, there is the word Nazi in it. Does this mean the U.S. military is broadcasting alt-right messages over the radio? Probably not, but I did want to bring attention to this. You will sometimes see words in these messages. I mean, just looking at the 1950 right now, you can see Rex towards the end. I think sometimes you'll see usually 3-4 character words. These usually can be attributed to kind of just not exactly random chance because these aren't randomly generated codes, right? But I guess not even pseudo-random. I don't know what the right word would be here. But there used to be a working theory, and I think it's still a theory we can assume mostly holds up, that probably when certain encryptions result in certain words appearing in the messages, that they probably re-roll. And there's no source for this, just people kind of have always talked about this as kind of common sense, that they probably make sure the certain words aren't in it. Thinking through, I'm not going to pull up any examples for you on the screen, but I think I've seen like a location name show up once or something. Maybe nothing's coming up in search results, but I'm just thinking, I think like the word city or something showed up once. Yeah, there's a message from 2018. If you go on EAM.watch and type city, you'll see a message made 2018 had the word city. Random example. But, you know, it's a fair assumption that, for example, if a message said like nuke, yeah, nuke has never shown up in a message. The word silo has, though. March 2nd and June 16th, the word silo showed up in a few messages here and there. But for example, like nuke or bomb or war, like if something said like New York City somehow, kind of random chance, the assumption would be that they would probably re-roll, and there's maybe a list of words where whatever kind of computations they're using, if that word pops up, it just, you know, re-rolls, changes the parameters so that it's encoded differently. If that list exists, which I personally assume such a list would exist, it seems like the word Nazi is not on there, so there you go. The word Nazi made it into the database of HFGCS messages. Congratulations to anyone who had money on that, I guess. Not much else to say about the rest of the day here. I didn't have an opportunity to look into how some of these messages might line up with others, but nothing really sticking out, you know, the 42 to 38. So skipping ahead to September 16th, guess the big thing for this day would be the 166 character message that broadcast at 5:19. And I tweeted out a few things about the 166 character message, but I'll just kind of put up the formatted time cards here because it makes it a little bit easier to look through. If we take a look at the one that was broadcast that day and compare it to some of the previous 166 character messages I've transcribed in the past, you start to see like inklings of a general format there. And I believe there was another one that you could take a look at there. It's just interesting to see. Superficially, it's quite similar to the 246 character format and quite a number of other long message formats where you kind of have those 4 character repeating things that split the message up into substrings. But certainly between all the 166, it's interesting to kind of see this 55 character substring at the end. And I highly suspect, and you can already tell just from looking at the messages, it does look like you probably could break that down a little bit more. I just don't think it's likely, you know, when you have the rest of the message split up into like 18 character substrings, that they would just have a giant 55 character chunk at the end. The other thing we can talk about here is, again, on September 14th, I tweeted out about, you know, these, I guess we'll call them trigrams. At the end of this message, we have a trigram, the Whiskey, Whiskey, Juliet, Juliet, Victor, Victor, towards the end there. That's a little bit interesting. I don't know what to make of it. I think we haven't seen any trigrams since, so they were kind of clustered together like that. I find that a little bit interesting. Do you find that interesting? Do you find that boring? I don't know. but we move on. September 17th, looking at the messages themselves, there's not too much really jumping out at me here. If you're a conspiracy wonk, maybe you'll find the 1545 message that just says Q and then got disregarded. Trust the plan, folks. I know I do. Kidding or not, I don't know. If it gets me clicks, I trust the plan. If it doesn't, if people get mad and unsubscribe, then no, I don't trust the plan. I don't care. More significantly, I guess this was the day a F-35 crashed in North Carolina. There's a news story there, but as of this time, I think it's still not clear whether it's operator negligence or a machine malfunction of some kind. Honestly, I'm not sure exactly what time of the day that crash happened, but I do know, skipping ahead to September 18th, the plane was located, or like its debris or whatever was kind of found. It took them like the better part of 18 hours to find this thing after the pilot ejected. And apparently the plane kept flying on its own for several hours until finally crashing somewhere. They located it, I think, around 5 Eastern. That would be about 2100 UTC. Point being, there's nothing in the messages in the interval of time the plane may have been missing between, across the 17th and 18th. Nothing here really points to me as these are messages that indicate they were trying to locate the plane. I don't think any coordination occurred over the HFGCS for locating that plane. So we move on to September 19th. There was something interesting broadcast over the frequencies on these days. It wasn't a structured message like the kind we usually see on these time cards. It was a Wolfhound message. It may well be the topic of a future video, but if you guys are in the EAM.watch Discord, something you maybe want to look into. And if you want to look it up yourself on the EAM.watch website, if you type in the phrase international airspace, 2 words, you've got a space in the middle there between international and airspace, you will find a message. Broadcast September 19th, and if you just compare it to Skybird messages broadcast in the past, you will see it looks very similar to those, but interestingly, instead of saying Skybird, it says Wolfhound. So again, that'll be something I should eventually tackle in a video in the future. If you guys are interested in that, want to see it sooner rather than later, I guess, let me know in the comments, just so that it doesn't slip my mind. Moving on, September 20th, so a few things here, couple things, nothing too exciting. You'll probably find it boring, but I find it interesting. The 912 message, well, I guess let's maybe go in order here. The 630 message is 56 characters, but other than the Sierra couplet, there's not a lot to work with there, unfortunately, so we'll have to leave that as is. The 912 message from Cathedral, if memory serves, that is the debut of the Mike November prefix. We will see that prefix show up again on a later date, but not in the confines of this video, so I believe it was on the 23rd or 24th that we heard another Mike November message, and that was another long form message. But one thing that we can look at here, the 2350 message, the 30 character, the Charlie Zulu prefix is also brand new, and it's usually hard to tell at the start, but certainly after the 21st and 22nd, and again right now I'm recording this September 25th, the 2132 message, that was the last time we saw the Papa Juliet prefix in use. So September 20th would be notable here for introducing a new prefix for the standard 30 character messages. And I guess one more thing we can note here for anyone who's maybe kind of newer or has forgotten. The note on the 1638 message, signal cutout during transmission. So yeah, this is something that happens. The HFGCS is not a cheap program. The U.S. military spends millions of dollars on this little experiment in shortwave radio. Nonetheless, they're dealing with quite old equipment. Some of the antennas in this system are from the 80s at this point. Every 30 years, they go through apparently like major overhauls, every 20, 30 years or so. From the digging I've done suggests that, but I think the most recent overhaul in the mid-2000s wasn't exhaustive, so there's still a lot of old equipment. I think they're starting to go through another major overhaul of their equipment right now, but until that happens, and probably even after, these little hiccups will persist. As you can see, even though the message kind of cut out and we didn't get to hear the full thing, the operator came back on shortly after on the 1642 message. quite likely to be what the 1638 message was supposed to be. September 21st, as you can see, quite a lot of messages. How many is that? 34. So I wasn't doing any live monitoring or transcribing that day. I kind of caught up after the fact. But certainly you can see a lot of messages here. A lot of repeats. Nothing much in terms of structure per se. If we hop ahead to the notes, you can kind of see a couple things here. You know, the 1542, there was another instance of signal cutting out during transmission. So we didn't get to hear that full message, and it had to get repeated a few minutes later. One thing I want to talk about here, though, is the 09 message, because this is going to come up as a snag in my database. If you check out the recording on EAM.watch, this was read as a 29-character message. The operator read it both times as a 29-character message. They didn't say it would be a 29-character message, but they usually do not do that for messages less than 30. However, if we compare this message broadcast September 21st at 000900 hours to the 2350 message broadcast the day before, so like what, 19 minutes before this message was broadcast, it is nearly identical save for a single character. And as we can see with the Charlie Zulu prefix, this is always used for 30-character messages. It is a successor to the Papa Juliet prefix, which was only ever used for messages over 30 characters, never more, never less, never for any addressee. I feel like I'm not even going out on a limb. This is not speculation. I can tell you with definite confidence that the 0900 from Van Dyke is an error. They are missing a golf. They should have had a golf. It's actually interesting if you look at the 109 message that they do now have a golf where there originally should have been one. Is it possible that the 0109 is a correction to the 0009? I think so. You know, another thing, if you add in that missing golf, you have the EE where 22 is. It is strange it's a Quebec Kilo rather than Charlie Zulu, but that could tell you something about the relationship between message prefixes. Speaking of message prefixes, just like September 20th retired Papa Juliet for Charlie Zulu, you are going to see the introduction of the Echo Golf prefix with the 2130 message. And from context, and because we never see the Quebec Kilo prefix again, it is obvious that the Charlie Zulu the Echo Golf replaces the Quebec Kilo. So there's something for you there. So that prefix, that is for messages that can be and often are longer than 30 characters, and occasionally will be for an addressee. In this case, you know, messages for Udico 2 and for Civit 2.2. Also on September 21st, we had an interesting entry into EAM.watch. I didn't hear this one myself, but apparently there may have been a message from an Alpha Bravo Charlie attempting to reach mainsail. So Alpha Bravo Charlie, I've never heard that call sign before. That's either someone doing a quick comms check or it's a super important call sign. Leaning towards the former, not entirely willing to rule out the latter. Haven't heard any ABCs since. September 22nd. 2023, that's the last message we're going to go through today. Nothing really to say here. I guess one thing we can kind of look at, and this is something that comes up in the past, and you can see some of the messages have been for other call signs. I believe people who track the HFGCS were able to examine and confirm that there was a Mercury E6 with that call sign in the air at that time, or kind of took off shortly after that message was broadcast. Can't quite remember off the top of my head. I may or may not flash up a screenshot for you. That covers, 11, 12 days inclusive. I don't know how to count. That's kind of the kind of stuff that you will observe if you track the HFGCS and transcribe messages long enough. This is actually a fairly boring period of time, to be very blunt about it, other than the 166 character message and the opportunity to kind of coordinate that with past instances of 166 character messages and get an idea of the format. Nothing too exciting with the messages. The Wolfhound/Skybird thing that I mentioned occurred September 19th. Thank you. That was certainly interesting. I didn't get to hear that one myself. Oh, well, these things happen. And I guess the thing with the trigrams. And I would guess for most people watching this video right now, you really don't care. That's okay. I find it interesting, and if at least a few other people find it interesting, that's awesome. Next video, I was planning on doing a kind of big long form video about SkyMaster messages. I don't have enough information for that. It's a lot harder to find information about SkyMaster than I thought. I may just do a summary like what I originally promised, which is kind of just a summary of the SkyMaster messages we heard on August 30th and 31st. The other thing I'm thinking of making a video on is just because the last few days, September 23rd, 24th, and 25th, have been very weird. A lot of strange signals on the HFGCS. Time distance on arrival analysis suggests some of these signals that I'm finding quite annoying and confusing and weird are coming from Russia. These signals can only be heard using European SDRs so far. It does not seem like a coordinated, deliberate attempt to jam the HFGCS because it's only happening on 11175, but they don't seem to be targeting 8992. Targeting itself is even a strong word, but it's certainly suspicious. It's nothing I've heard while monitoring 11175 using the U20 SDR, and certainly I've used that SDR more than you would care to do. So that's the end of the video as originally posted online back in September of 2023. As mentioned at the top, I wanted to save a couple of comments for the end rather than interjecting during the video itself. Now, while I'm not going to go through and recontextualize everything discussed, there are 2 points I wanted to take as an example to give you an idea of what kind of developments you might expect subsequent to that. So the first one is the idea of the AABBCC pattern showing up in messages. I was calling it a trigram. By the way, that's not the correct name for it. Regardless, just the idea that it doesn't show up very often in messages. Now, the last few months, I haven't been monitoring and transcribing comprehensively, but I can show you from the messages that I have transcribed, the idea that this doesn't show up very often mostly holds up. I have 2 matches. One is from an April 1st message, and it has Zulu Zulu 44 Whiskey Whiskey, so that's a hit. And there is on screen for you as well. It's a little tough to read at the bottom. An April 15th message, which has Quebec, Quebec, Romeo, Romeo, November, November. Now, the second one I consider actually a little bit of a false positive. So it is a 120 character long message. And you may notice if you go through that the message has a structure that looks like some of the other long messages discussed not just in this video, but documented throughout this channel and on Twitter. So the November, November at the end is actually part of an November, 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 November tetragram, which as we see used in these longer messages, seems to be serving a purpose as a line or a section break and not necessarily a part of a message in and of itself, if you understand what I'm getting at. So connecting that November, November to the Quebec, Quebec, Romeo or Romeo is a little bit misleading, and I think that's kind of a false positive. The second thing I thought it would be interesting to follow up on. So during the video, I mentioned how on September 15th, we saw the appearance of the word November Alpha Zulu India showing up in the alphanumeric sequence of an EAM. Now, I'm sure there have been other messages that have probably popped up again with the same words, but my interest in history being what it is, I guess I'm going to end up noticing this word every time it pops up. And it has popped up at least one more time, a message broadcast April 18th. Now, as I said in September, and I'm still saying this is effectively a coincidence. What I will say, what I kind of want to amend was something I was only starting to poke at in the video originally, which is many assumed as kind of a point of common sense, the idea there would be a list of words that are automatically filtered out of being allowed to show up in EAMs. I don't know if such a list may exist at all. So, I mean, I guess one way we'll find out is if we ever see any expletives showing up in messages. But as I mentioned in the video, there have been so many other quote-unquote loaded terms showing up in character sequences, past and present, that I'm finding myself less and less inclined to take the idea of such a list as a given. So I think speculation on it is a little bit spurious and ultimately serves no purpose and is risky because it's just something where someone who's less familiar may come across the information that I share as part of this project and decide this guy doesn't know what he's talking about because he's being proven wrong. But it's not really a hill I want to die on, if you know what I'm getting at here. Those are 2 examples. I'm sure there are other things. So some of the longer messages with certain lengths, there have been messages of similar lengths or identical lengths broadcast in the period subsequent. And as you get more familiar with this channel, if you're not already, you yourself will learn to pick those out, recognize them, and begin to look for patterns. patterns, I should say, which this is the first video in this reupload series. So similar patterns, other patterns will be discussed, and you'll get more and more an idea what I mean when I say that word. Before this video ends, I want to thank all of the people who have sponsored this channel, both past and present. At this time, I want to give a very special shout out to Paul R, Chris K up north, and Dat Silencer. And I also want to thank at this time all of the following: Procos, Espresso, Thomas S, Rick, David, Rodney, Yellowbird, PR, Kelly, Sina Veritas, None Your Business, Ron Stacy, Yo Cassie, Welcome to Redneckistan, Mark L, Joe Blow, Reaper 1, and Jaded. And please, now that YouTube is monetized, it doesn't tell me who is sponsoring the channel and who is just winning one of the free membership giveaways. So if you have contributed to this channel and I missed you, please let me know so that I can include you in future video acknowledgements. Finally, if you're able to, you can join the aforementioned in actively supporting this channel with the links that are on screen at this time. And if you haven't already, you can follow the Neat Intel Project both here on YouTube as well as on Twitter. Until next time, bye!